Final Fantasy XIV Dawntrail has had a bit of a rocky road, however, we're seeing some light at the end of the tunnel with patch 7.3. In my opinion, the best patch this expansion has had by far. Not only did it contain my favorite MSQ of the expansion, but the content we're getting now in patch 7.35 is proving to be, and shaping up to be, my favorite content we've gotten in all of Dawntrail. It's not perfect, but I do think this is showing that the game is rebounding from where it was. Hello everybody, I am Jmulls, and it's time to game!
As queen?
Okay, so let's talk about that Arkfeld fight, the Final Fantasy XIV and Monster Hunter Wilds collaboration. A lot of people have been talking about the Omega fight in Monster Hunter. I have partaken in the Arkfeld fight in Final Fantasy XIV, and it's a doozy. It definitely feels more like a Final Fantasy XIV fight than a Monster Hunter fight. And I think the best way I would describe this fight is they looked at all the animations Arkfeld does in the base game of Monster Hunter Wilds and said, okay, how can we turn that into a Final Fantasy XIV mechanic? I wouldn't really say that it feels like a Monster Hunter fight, even the bits that I've done on Extreme. Like, the potion's just kind of there as a bit of a buffer in case your healers can't keep up, but the fight does kind of boil down to dodge all the things, the fight, with a few mechanics here and there that call for actual coordination and movement, especially on Extreme. But what I do appreciate about this fight is how telegraphed it is, where you are looking at Arkfeld for certain mechanics to know what he's about to do, also the markers on the ground, but also the pace of the fight. Now, it is a normal mode trial, and I would probably argue, even if I haven't done too many extremes in Dawntrail, that this extreme's probably on the easier side of things, or at least I didn't feel as if it was too difficult. Though I do play tank, so take that with a grain of salt. But regardless, I don't think the quality of a fight is necessarily derived by how difficult it is, but by how mechanically engaging and cool it is. And in those regards, I think Arkfeld succeeds wholeheartedly. It is a visual spectacle. It is a cluster of cool explosions and colors, and the fight just feels really dang cool and fun. And despite my group wiping over and over and over and over again on Extreme, I was having a ball doing it. And I felt myself become more comfortable with each mechanic over the course of the fight, and you know, that's something you want out of a fight that has, in my opinion, good mechanics. It's just something you naturally get better at and are able to like suss out. Again, there's nothing particularly revolutionary about the mechanics here, I just think it's overall well executed. And while the preamble we get with the questing leading up to the fight is just a bit dull in my opinion, we're basically just tracking Arkfeld doing some very rudimentary quests. That one scene where we cook the food, like, oh my god, probably unironically one of the best animated cutscenes in the entire game, and I'm not even joking. I wouldn't be surprised if you show that scene out of context if some people thought it was just from Monster Hunter Wilds on like low graphics or something, because the animations of you cooking the food and then slicing it into individual steaks and then eating it, like they actually show you ripping into the meat and tearing it off with your teeth. May not sound all that impressive, but remember, it's Final Fantasy XIV. When people used to eat, we either cut away or it would just go awkwardly up to their mouth until eventually they just Halo Forge balled like a bit of it away. But yeah, there is a lot to collect here. Housing items, if you want the Hope Glamour set, which is the basic starter set for Monster Hunter Wilds, you can get that. The weapons, by the way, look so much better in-game than on the website, in my opinion. Oh my god, that Dark Knight weapon and also the Viper swords are gorgeous. And I love the little detail in the Dark Knight weapon where the teeth on the edge of the sword also like jiggle if you move it around. Very nice. It does make me a double bit salty that we don't have an Arkfeld armor set for this, but I'll try to look past that. I'm not going to, but I'm going to try at least. But yeah, overall, it's a fun collab fight. If you weren't particularly a fan of Rathalos back in the day because of the ways they try to make it feel like Monster Hunter, that's not really present here. There's like one mechanic that I've noticed that Arkfeld does that can like knock you on your butt and stun you for a bit, and like besides that, you have the potion. Which again, you don't really need to do so long as you do the mechanics correctly. Or if your healers are awake, it's like, you'll be fine. It's a fun fight.
As queen?
Now for the content that has, in my opinion, the most teeth for me personally in all of Dawntrail. The Deep Dungeon. They cooked. I haven't done all of it yet. I got to floor 40, which in the grand scheme of things isn't too deep, but I have put some time into this, especially since I had to redo floors 21 to 30 because I needed more levels for my weapon to be able to do 31 through 40. But the story of the Deep Dungeon is actually really dang good. It's focused around the Fey people of the first, and also Fey'Ul. I like both of those things. I love the story of the first. We get more world building for the first. We learn more of the history of the first, and also the Fey people. And also Fey'Ul. She is a major character here. Fey'Ul was one of my favorite characters from Shadowbringers, and I'm so glad we haven't just forgotten about her, and we're actively bringing her back into the story and giving her more. And then navigating the actual Deep Dungeon itself, personally speaking, my favorite environment they've ever done for a Deep Dungeon, not even close. It's gorgeous! And the way the Deep Dungeon evolves visually as you go further and further in it, I will say, they talked about it going like side to side. I do not get that feeling at all. It just kind of feels like you're teleporting to different locations. But in terms of critiques, it's the most minor thing possible, and I don't really care about that element. It's just something I noticed, and I kind of giggle at when I remember it. But noticing the little environmental details, if you find time and you're able to just stop and look at the environments, especially when you look outside of the windows in certain locations, my god, there was so much care and attention into the actual environmental detail of this location. It's so good. I'm also wondering if they're trying to do something a little bit deeper with the storytelling. That, or I might be an idiot. It's like 50-50. Because I notice sometimes when I'm going to a new floor, line of dialogue start to pop up in the chat, and I don't know if that's because someone popped an item and we get flavor text for that. Specifically when I passed through like Stone, which is like their version of floor here. Stone like 32, but also 36. There was one line of dialogue in the chat that goes, "Something calls out for warmth." I love little background storytelling elements like that, so I'm eating up the Deep Dungeon, and I'm super excited to dive into it even more. Now, I have never been a Deep Dungeon aficionado, or anything like that. This one definitely comes off as if it's easier than the other ones that I've personally done. I'm not saying that it is, my memory could just be bad, but going through floors 1 through 30, I'm almost certain I could have done it blind. The difficulty does feel as if it starts to pick up when you get to floor 31 onwards. Like, it seemed as if each mechanic the regular enemies would do in floor 31 to 40 would do like 75% of my HP or so, or even more. But the thing that always used to bore me with Deep Dungeons beforehand was that the varying elements of the Deep Dungeon never mixed things up enough to really pique my interest. However, here, they go wacky with it. Sometimes you can get power-ups to have Fey'Ul just come in and nuke the entire floor, which is hilarious to do on the floor right before the boss fight. It's like a victory lap. But then also there are some floors that just turn you into a giant ball of dung or something, like probably mud. It looks like poo to me. And you get a new ability where you just charge through enemies doing damage, or you turn into a giant bomb guy and you just do a giant explosion and it just wipes out any enemy in a huge radius around you. And everyone in your party transforms into these things at the start of each floor. I don't know if it's necessarily random or if it's for specific floors. If it's random, it's so funny when it happens. It's basically a free floor, but I don't mind stuff like that in a roguelike piece of content like this because it breaks up the flow and also gives you a bit of adrenaline and says, oh, that's a nice little shot in the arm so I can keep going. And there's other floors that make it more difficult for you to engage with various enemies, either reducing your HP, that can be kind of brutal sometimes with how much damage these guys can do on occasion, or just reducing your damage and being mean about it, or giving you various buffs. I feel they have a good pace when it comes to giving you the items that you acquire over the course of the Deep Dungeon, and I find myself often actually using quite a few of them to either lift certain debuffs they apply to me, or to buff myself up during the boss fight, because, hi Mr. Boss, I see you, I shall raise you damage buff, haste buff, and a defense buff. It is still very much a Deep Dungeon in Final Fantasy XIV, but sometimes it's the small things that can go a long way, and I think the rather minor tweaks and amendments they've made to the Deep Dungeon formula going into the one we have now, I think they've gone a long way to make it something I'm actually interested in doing. My biggest concern here is that I don't know if I care about like any of the rewards. Scratch that, I just remembered the Fwath outfit you can get from this thing. It looks comically large on my character and I need it.
As queen.
But patch 7.3 was more than just patch 7.35. While I like the Arkfeld fight and while I like the Deep Dungeon, I also loved the MSQ we had with patch 7.3. It was my favorite MSQ patch, probably since 6.0. So when I look at patch 7.3 in its totality, for me, it is easily my favorite patch of Dawntrail, and it's not particularly close. It had content that appealed to me specifically, alongside story that really got me reinvested in the actual product and the future potential of the story of Final Fantasy XIV. I felt that it really found itself again and built off what succeeded in patch 7.2 narratively, and really found its groove in terms of the mechanics of telling a story. Having good pacing, good writing, good dialogue, good characterization, which is a heck of a lot more than I can say of my own personal opinion about 7.0 and 0.1. And while I don't personally believe that patch 7.3 is enough to quote-unquote save Final Fantasy XIV for a bunch of people that have become disillusioned or burnt out on the game, I think it is a massive step in the right direction and one that the game needed to take before we get to the 8.0 hype train. I don't think in a realistic world there was ever going to be a patch for Final Fantasy XIV in Dawntrail that was going to completely right the ship and completely turn all this bad PR FF14 has accrued over the last year or so and just flip it on its head. I don't think there was ever a realistic patch this game was going to put out that could accomplish that. What it needed to do for me was to show, hey, we're taking that feedback into account, both narratively and mechanically speaking. We're going to try a few new different things, and we're going to take the core of Final Fantasy XIV and just do it well. That's what 7.3 was for me. While I don't see it being a patch that will like double the sub numbers or anything like that, I have been enjoying my time with FF14. I think 7.3 and specifically 7.35's biggest weakness and the biggest issue that I'm going to have with it is the longevity of the content, which is still a problem Final Fantasy XIV needs to find a way to address. For me, the reason I don't think the Deep Dungeon or the Arkfeld fight are going to have much staying power for me is because I just don't really care about the rewards all that much. Again, besides the Fwath gear from the Deep Dungeon, I need that set. I might try to get the odd mounted to, but there's nothing I'm screaming and chomping at the bit to actually acquire outside of the Dark Knight sword from the Arkfeld fight, which I got on my first kill. My previous opinions on a video talking about the rewards for the Arkfeld fight still apply here. They didn't provide me an Arkfeld armor set or an Arkfeld mount. Those would have been the only two things I really wanted out of that piece of content, reward-wise. When it comes to the Deep Dungeon, I think it's a really fun piece of content, and it's one that I look forward to putting more time into and progressing because I think that content is fun. For me, good rewards aren't just a matter of quantity, that's part of it, it's also a matter of quality. And the problem with that is that quality is inherently subjective when it comes to cosmetic progression in an MMORPG. People just like different things, and it just so happens to be that for Dawntrail, a lot of the cosmetics they provide just don't really do it for me. And for a piece of content in an MMORPG, if you care about the rewards or not, makes a big difference in terms of your actual motivation to engage in that piece of content. Especially when I personally have so many other things in games that I can play at this current point in time. Like, I'm playing through the entire Trail series, I'm playing through Xenosaga, soon also Xenogears. I don't only play Final Fantasy XIV for MMOs, I also play World of Warcraft. That game's putting out a lot of stuff nowadays that I really like. So, like, in a weird way, it's possible that this current state of Final Fantasy XIV actually appeals to me more, like, now that I'm, like, talking through it and thinking about it, because, well, it's a game I'm able to dive in and out of without really feeling as if I'm missing much if I do take a bit of a break from the game here and there. But for people that want to mono game, which I think is an entirely fair playstyle for an MMORPG, I don't think FF14 and Dawntrail specifically really scratches that itch. And I think that's one of the elements that they could probably address going into 8.0. I don't think they could ever really address it properly with patch 7.4 and 5. I think it's an 8.0 thing they need to address.
As queen.
For Final Fantasy XIV, I wanted them to do a couple of things. I wanted them to take more risks, I wanted them to get more experimental with gameplay, and I wanted them to execute on the core principles of being Final Fantasy XIV well. I think 7.3 does a good job of doing that. The Deep Dungeon to me is fun and interesting, and I like the little gimmicks they throw in there. The story of the Deep Dungeon is weirdly good for me. I love having more Feywild lore. The Arkfeld fight was really fun. The dungeon we got in 7.3, those months ago, go, probably my favorite dungeon of the entire expansion. Easily my favorite MSQ of the expansion. And while it still retains some issues that I have from Dawntrail's overall design, like longevity and the specific rewards they give you, overall, pretty dang good patch. Which is a heck of a lot better than I can say for the last few patches this game has had. So yeah, those are my thoughts on patch 7.3 of Final Fantasy XIV Dawntrail. Easily the best patch this expansion has had, even if that's not the highest bar. But here's where you come in, because I want to hear what you think, your thoughts and your opinions. Leave a comment down below with how you have felt about patch 7.3. Has it moved the needle for you much? Have you been enjoying your time with the content? What has been your favorite piece of content in the patch? And what is still your biggest issue with the overall game state? I would love to hear your thoughts, hear your opinions, and hear your perspectives. And while you're down there, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. And if in fact you want to see me take down Arkfeld, normal, but Arkfeld nonetheless, you should check out this video right here for more. Stay safe, everybody, have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody. Until we meet again!